All right, everybody, we are back again for another episode of the Coach's Compass. Remember, I don't know what episode it is because we just continue to record. We continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. It's your boy, Coach Coop, reporting live from the US of A. And we got another special guest with us today. Now, remember, hit that like, subscribe, comment button down below so we continue to have this thing grow, continue to bring on cool guests from all across the world. We got ourselves Coach Joe Padulla out of the University of Oklahoma, working with softball and women's golf, formerly with TCU Athletics and the Kansas City Royals. Coach, thank you and welcome for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. So first off, how did the journey into this strength and conditioning world start for you?
Yeah, what I tell people is I always wanted to be a physical therapist. That was my path as a kinesiology student in college. And in my first experience, I was a PT aide in a clinic in my hometown. Just things weren't the way that I expected. No disrespect to anybody at all, but it felt very cookie cutter. And like PTs I talk to say that, like, yeah, it's modern PT is kind of broken. You know, you kind of rehab somebody and then you send them right back out into the situation they got hurt in, and like the same thing happens or worse, because there's no gap, or there's no like bridge that bridges the gap between therapy and performance. Like things on a table, things on a machine, like exercises and massage and treatment like that are not preparing athletes at the highest level. And I felt like I could do a good job at preparing athletes. And that's how I got into strength and conditioning. I think the other big part was my development as an athlete. I was never an outstanding athlete by any stretch of the word. I mean, I came into college throwing literally 75 miles per hour as a pitcher. I converted from infield to pitching when I was a freshman in college because we had two guys that one of them was academically ineligible, another guy had shoulder surgery, so we needed arms. And I'm out there competing for shortstop behind a senior captain. So it's like, well, if they're going to use me on the pitching staff, I might as well try to develop at it. And within like 2.5 years of developing as a pitcher, I was throwing 90 miles an hour. I had a very successful college career as a pitcher. And, you know, a big reason why I feel so confident training young athletes is because I've done the things I'm asking them to do. I've put myself through it. I know what works, at least for me and the hundreds of athletes that I've crossed paths with. So I have a personal attachment to development because of what I went through. Um, that's really like deeply rooted in who I am and my journey as an athlete. So I think that really sums it up. I think there's just a lot more to development and preparing athletes than physical therapy and rehab. And I think the human body is a lot more capable than a lot of therapists and medical practitioners think or make it out to be. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, doctor said so and so can't do this. And it's like, well, they're doing this and they need to eventually be able to do this. So like, you know, we got to try something here to move them in the direction we want them to go, or else we're going to put them out there and they're never going to be prepared, you know? So it's always just this conversation of preparation and bringing the best out of an athlete and truly preparing them for what they're going to experience.
And how do you feel like, I mean, you went from that cookie cutter style of being in PT and then switching over to strength and conditioning. What was it? What was that bridge like from going from one to the other? And how are you yourself helping prepare these athletes and having those genuine conversations that, hey, a doctor might have told you one thing or wherever you went to go to get your treatment done, like told you this, but like how are you helping them overcome that, I guess, the mental block really and get them physically ready to get onto the field and do what they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it is the mental confidence and the preparation that they feel like they have. And there's really only one way to do that, and it's to train hard and to like prove to yourself that you're ready. You know, what one thing that's tough is like we're at the mercy of doctors and people that are prescribing things and doing operations. Like, I'm not trying to assert myself as someone who's intellectually superior as them, but like there are instances where it's like, oh, so and so can run, like they're cleared to run, but they're not allowed to jump. And it's like, well, the forces endured during sprinting are dramatically higher than jumping. So like, what's the reason that they can't jump? So like, it's stuff like that that kind of confuses me that I have to obey. But like in certain situations, like if it's an outsourced physical therapist in like an old job that I had, like I used to work with high school kids who would say, oh, so and so said I can't do this, and I'm not like legally responsible for listening to that person. Like those situations were a little different. It's like, yeah, no, bro, I'm going to educate you on why that's like not really the best thing for you. And it's just instilling confidence one session at a time. I think the other big thing with PT and why I felt like it was cookie cutter, it's just here's the injury, here's the protocol we have there for the injury, we're going to run the protocol. And in strength and conditioning, it's more about the underlying stimulus. And like this is what my business is built on, is getting people to understand the practical application of methods that were taught. So like, you have a method or an exercise or a way of doing something, but what's the underlying mechanism for why it works? Like, what's the stimulus you're trying to deliver? If you don't know those things, you can't have a systems-based approach to program design based on who you're dealing with, what time of the year it is, what time of day it is. Is it before or after practice? The training age of your athletes, the skill level of them, what you've done prior to prepare them for X, Y, Z, or whatever you're trying to do. So, there's a term in strength and conditioning: all roads lead to Rome. Like, I don't think all roads do. Many do. There's a lot of stuff that people do that just doesn't work and isn't as beneficial as some other things. But that's really what my course is built on. My whole business is about getting people to kind of rationalize like the time and place for different things and why we utilize certain things and the reasons for those things and the mechanisms for why they work. And also helping people just contextually determine what's best. Like, I could say something works really well for me right here, but at a different university or a different program, like in pro ball, it's not the same. The proof is in the pudding. When I came to OU, I had to change so much about what I thought was true because I'm dealing with a new subset of the athletic population, a new schedule, a new dynamic, a new personality, people that are extremely successful at what they do. I mean, I was never around athletes that won numerous championships in a row. Like that, you don't come by that in pro ball. So it's just very different navigating personalities and things like that, and also their prior experiences. Like, I'm the new strength coach stepping in 2023, but you've won 3 championships with someone else. So if I do something different, it's going to be like, oh, we've never done this before. Is this going to work? Type of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's a constant battle to win the athlete over and get buy-in and trust. So a lot of that is, okay, I'll give you a little bit of what you want if you give me some of this. It's always a little bit of a trade-off and compromise. That's how I've been able to get more commitment from my team.
Well, I mean, obviously what you did work because in 2024 they win another one. So like,
Yeah.
you had at least you got a leg to stand on now, right?
Well, I also like to say that, it's funny because the new group comes in and it's like the buy-in is a lot easier to earn because you're there before them, like you're the guy who's, your position's kind of solidified and they're the one stepping into your domain really instead of the opposite, what the other way around. But to what you just said, like, what you did worked. I'm very hesitant to say that sometimes because, and I've said this on numerous podcasts and I say this in my course too, is like, there's a lot of coaches that discredit themselves because the team was a losing team. Like that doesn't always mean that you're a bad strength coach. And there's also coaches that give themselves way too much credit because the team was successful. But like what we know about elite athletes is that they can thrive and perform at a high level even on like one of the worst designed programs ever, as long as they don't get injured. Because they're just so talented and so genetically robust that they can kind of endure anything and still find a way to execute. So I think it's important for coaches to know that, and that's a really significant message that I deliver to people a lot, especially when I'm mentoring young coaches.
What's it like to mentor young coaches? Because I think that's a huge topic that I think a lot of coaches, when they're getting into the strength and conditioning field, is really tough because they're starting off and they're not knowing where the journey leads to. Because you talk about for yourself, you went from the pros back down to the college sector, and you just don't know really what you're getting yourself into. So what is it like having those conversations with newer strength coaches that are just not getting in and they're in the GA role, or maybe they've come from a different school, coming from a smaller school, coming to a big school, or even like yourself, dropping from the pros down to the college level? What's the main message that you're trying to deliver to these guys?
Yeah, I think one of the main messages I'm trying to deliver, and I'll use a phrase that you just said, like, and I don't think you meant it like this, but it's a good way to preface what I'm trying to say. It's like you said, oh, you moved like from pro down to college. Some people have like a hierarchy where it's like high school is down here. Then if you want to move up, it's college. Then pro is the top. And like if you're in the pros, you're automatically the best because you're with pros. Like I think moving up is indicative of like, okay, how are you able to carry out like your life goals? Like, can you have a family? Can you, like, are you happier? Are you getting paid better? Is the professional development better? Is your personal life better? Like, that's what I consider moving up. I don't think, like, people have this logo fever, they call it, where it's like, okay, he's worked for the New York Yankees, he must be the best ever. Like, it's just not true. I know a lot of strength coaches in minor league baseball that I didn't think were outstanding. Like, it's very hard to I said it's very easy to mistake someone for how good they and effective they really are just based off where they're at. And I have to kind of shield myself from that, because when people look into our program and they look at me and they see the championships and they see all the success, like, I have to be very, very careful to stay humble and, like, not take people's words with a grain of salt, because I know there's always more to go. There's always more to learn. Just because I'm with an SEC school does not by any means mean that I'm the best, or I should be regarded as one of the best. And I think people should understand that. Like, I know so many good coaches at mid majors, and so many good coaches at the high school level, and so many good coaches in the private sector that no one knows about. Just because their platform isn't as large, because people aren't gravitating towards them because they're trying to associate, like, a university or a logo to their name. Like, I think that's what people do with me, and I think that's been a reason why I've grown on social media very fast, is because people assimilate my affiliation with OU as my competency as a coach. And I'm not saying that I'm not competent, but I do think I'm maybe a little less developed than people think I am. Like, I think I have a long ways to go, for sure. So that's one thing I try to convey to young coaches. Then the other thing is giving them the proper resources to actually learn. A lot of people don't know what questions to ask, but that's because, like, they haven't exposed themselves to enough material to know what questions to ask. It's like, if you're thrown into a profession you've never worked in before, you need someone to show you how to do something, or teach you something so that you can ask more questions. If you never get any information, how are you going to know what to ask about? So it's giving them digestible content, reading material, webinars, blogs, things like that. They need more information. They don't have enough to actually construct their own thought process. That's a big part of it. And I think I've been successful doing that, because I am very young. I'm 25 years old. All my athletes think that I'm like 28, 29, 30 the first time they see me. Maybe it's the mustache. I don't know.
Maybe it's the way you carry yourself, man.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I would hope so. But yeah, I mean, I think I really assimilate with a lot of these young coaches, and vice versa, because of how, like, approximate I am to them in age. So yeah, I mean, I think that sums it up. I do a lot of consult calls with young coaches. I've given referrals to people, things like that. So
How do you stay humble in all this? Because I mean, talking to you, I mean, you sound like you're very grounded. Like you're very well of knowing who you are, and you're okay with
thank you.
asking questions and going to others. And on top of that, being a younger guy in this industry, and you say you're looking up at these other coaches and that have been around for a while. How do you fight off? Because I know this is a hard thing, especially for us, all of us strength and conditioning coaches, fighting off the imposter syndrome. Like, are you in the right place at the right time? Like, am I doing, like, did that work out? Was it really successful? Did I get out what I wanted to get out of that for the athlete? Like, how do you fight off that?
I think a big way that I fight it off is starting with just the philosophy of athlete first. It's athlete first, 24/7, 365. If something doesn't work and players are complaining about it, or, like, if I implement something and you see, okay, half the team has shoulder pain, like, it must be something that I've done. Like, I'm not married to any particular method or exercise to where I take it personally when things go wrong. So I have a very easy time. I wouldn't say easy. It's easier for me than other people, I think, to, like, admit that I'm not doing the best, because the proof, like I said before, the proof is in the pudding. If, like, you can read whatever you want on paper in a book, and if you implement it and it doesn't work, you have to admit that wasn't time wasted, but you have to admit that, like, you got to dig deeper, or you got to figure something else out. But coaches that are not athlete first, and they're very egotistical, and they're married to methods, and, like, that's their personality, like, you're going to have a tough time, I guess, adjusting and adapting to dynamic athletes, because no athlete's the same. And I've never really had an issue saying that I'm wrong. I don't know. I think a lot of people struggle with that. I think, I don't know how I've acquired that, but I'm not afraid of humiliation, and, like, saying that I got something wrong for a long time. Like, I think the virtue and character of a coach is in, like, just striving for what's best for the athlete. So that's why I say athlete first. You said something else that I was going to comment on, and I completely forgot
You being humble and the imposter
the
syndrome. Yeah.
terminology you used. Yeah, imposter syndrome. That's what it was. I did an Instagram post a couple of years ago when I was struggling with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting take that my dad taught me actually on imposter syndrome. People that have imposter syndrome should actually feel good about themselves, because if you have imposter syndrome and you're asking more questions, that means that you know enough about your subject matter to know that you don't know enough about it. Like, some people don't know enough to where they're like, I have it figured out. Like, I don't know. If they, like, ignorance is bliss. If you don't know what you don't know, you're going to feel confident. But if you have imposter syndrome, you're going to know, like, you're going to be able to conceptualize in your mind before you even have the feeling of imposter syndrome that there's more to the subject that you might not be considering. And whatever it is that leads you to that thought process, like, it could be a million different things. I think that's a really good characteristic, actually. Like, people that have imposter syndrome, I'm like, they must be doing something right, actually. Because if you don't have that feeling, sometimes you might feel like you've got it all figured out, and you don't, because things are constantly developing. So, interesting take on imposter syndrome. I think young coaches should hear.
I
Um,
like that. So where, and I don't want to overlook this because I mean this is obviously how I found out a little bit more about what you're doing and doing some research on yourself. But where did Fidula Performance start, and how did that become a thing for you? And how's it been, kind of creating your own brand and identity? I mean, yes, we have the social media world and stuff, but obviously you still have to know what you're talking about. And I'm sure on there, like you get your comments of people questioning things and saying whatever they have to say. But I love your work, right? I'm
Thank
only
you.
seeing a little bit snippets, but like from what I know and what I've heard from, I mean, like I said, I know Coach Xavier over there. He said great things about you, right? So I just want to know how this all came about and what made you want to start your own performance stuff.
I think part of it starts with my ambition to teach. I feel like I'm a teacher at heart. I love educating people, and I like sharing my knowledge. I think in a growing profession, you need more people talking about this stuff. So I think that's the great thing about where our field is at now, is that more people are taking the initiative to share what they know. So that's a really good thing. Yeah, I mean, it really just started as me trying to create a robust future for me and my family. I mean, I'm engaged now. I needed another income stream. That was part of it. I mean, I think it was mainly that, and wanting to educate people. I started it officially in 2022. I launched the LLC, like, legally, and I kind of needed to do that because at the time I was training high school kids in the off season in New Jersey. Now that's not legal for me, being in the NCAA, but I needed to actually, like, move that money somewhere. So I, opened that bank account and started to, like, actually account for those finances and use that to reinvest into the business and things like that, buy equipment like timing gates and things like that. So that was one thing. And as I started to develop more, I was like, okay, I should probably release some programs. And the programs didn't do as well as I thought. And the more I learned about business, the more I understood, like, I wasn't speaking to my audience. So I actually studied my content for a long time. Like, there was like a month in time back in, like, June and July of 2024, like this past summer, when I realized, like, I'm attracting coaches, not athletes. Like, everything I write is educational. Athletes don't really want education. They kind of want entertainment on Instagram, and they want results. So, like, athletes will follow people who are entertaining, I feel like, more so than educational, because it's not their subject matter. And I don't think athletes sometimes care so much about what the mechanisms for why things work are. And I was basically going through, like, I was studying, like, literally my copywriting, like, how am I writing my message, and what's the, like, overall theme of it? Is it educational? Is it entertaining? Or is it, like, relational? Am I telling stories? Am I educating, or am I entertaining? And of all those three categories, I'm educating for sure. So, okay, what do people take interest in that want to be educated? Books, articles, courses. So that's when I built my Pragmatic Principles course. I worked, like, nonstop on it for like 2 months to create, like, a 3-4 hour video webinar, and that's what I sold. The direction my business is going now is to build on that. So I launched, like, the level 1 course, this summer or in the fall, I haven't decided how much time it's going to take to build this thing, but I'm going to do a mentorship that basically takes people through a deeper dive of level one. And that's going to be like 12 90-minute sessions in a row, like once a week for 12 weeks with homework assignments. And it's going to be live. People that can't make it live are going to get a video recording. So I truly believe that the promise in my business is going to be with courses and educating, because um, I do think I'm gifted with explaining things in a certain way. I think that's just a talent that I have that's just inherent to who I am. So that's the direction I'm going to go. So I think I missed and took a couple bad shots with like program design and selling programs, and not selling what my following base, like my followers, came to me for, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, you speak about it well, right? You talk about like, hey, and I know where the humbleness is coming from. Like, you're able to look at your business and say, hey, this really isn't tailoring towards who I wanted to tailor to. So let me study it. Let me take some time to look back at it, and then let's figure out what's actually going to work for the business. Now you not only on top of that, just thinking the business side, but how can I help others out and continue to educate? Who are you though continuing to like learn from and get mentored by? Because I think that's another hard part that you talked about for mentoring other coaches. Who yourself are you looking up to?
Yeah, a big thing is talking to my fellow coaches at OU. We're constantly having programming conversations, and we do staff education where we take each other through our philosophies, and training with my coworkers too is a big thing. Asking, hey, like, why are you doing this? I love to talk to my track strength coach, because like the track strength and conditioning is a lot different than team sport. I like to talk to him a lot about certain things. I'm big on webinars. I've been a member of Strength Coach Network since 2020. Zach Dakin's Baseball Performance Summit. Altus, I think, is a really great resource. There's so many coaches on social media. I mean, it sounds corny, but like social media is a place where I take a lot of information. People like Jake Tura, Will Rattel, Danny Foley, Tim Riley, like guys like that who are pushing content consistently are really, really valuable to me. I don't really say that I would pull my information from one place. And I think that's what helps me be a more dynamic thinker and help people solve problems in a bunch of different contexts, because I kind of just mix and match where I'm taking stuff from. It's like whatever I'm taking interest in the short term is what I'll dive into. Like lately, I've been doing a ton of force plate research and talking to people about force plates. Just this morning, I did an hour and a half consult call with a guy about force plates. So it's really like what I'm immediately dealing with and struggling with, like in my own coaching, that's going to like lead me where I want to go. I remember a couple of years ago, I got really deep down into like resisted sprinting, and I did a lot of JB Marin research and a lot of Ken Clark stuff and people like that to get information from. Les Spellman. So it's really all over the place, and I don't really have a structured like way to pick where I'm going to go next. It's like, oh, this looks interesting, let me dive into this. I don't really have a system for how I continue learning. Honestly, it's just I read kind of one book at a time, finish it. If I have any other questions with that book, I'll kind of look for other resources. Like right now, I'm reading Strength Deficit by Tim Karen. So like that's making me jump back into like Cal Dietz's triphasic book and trying to like cross validate some things that Tim's saying with what Cal is saying. Another guy that's talking a lot about eccentrics is Hunter Eisenhower with Arizona State, Anthony Cockrell with SMU volleyball, like guys like that. So I find kind of one topic and like who's talking about this topic, and then just pull from a whole bunch of different people to form like my own thought process on it.
I think that's really cool because I mean, you talk about Anthony, he's been on. We've had him on. Talk about Tim, he's been on. Like Kyle Deese, we've also had the opportunity to talk to. Like it's really awesome that a lot of coaches like are now actually speaking to each other and like learning from one another. Because I remember back when, if we talk about like back in the older days, like most of the strength coaches weren't talking to one another. Everyone was kind of keeping their
No,
information to themselves, and it's like, hey, what I'm doing is working best, and I don't want to share this knowledge to anybody else. But you
yeah,
guys are like, it is an awesome time period because I think a lot of coaches are now working together to help this thing grow. Because, like you said, athlete first, and that's something I
yeah.
think is super important because that's what our whole business is around and why we get into what we do. But what would you, if you could go back, what was something you wish you knew before you got into the industry?
Shoot, there's a lot. I think people are very unprepared for like the things that they feel like are true being proved wrong. Like one of the things that So in my pragmatic principles course, the first principle that I talk about is when in doubt, refer to the real world. There are so many things that you think will work. So you implement it for your 20, 25 athletes, but there's like 5 of them that it actually makes them worse. And it's like, oh, there's a reason why that happened. Like you got to figure it out. I think people are not prepared for that. And they're not prepared for like, okay, how many factors are truly going into this right here? Like I'm not accounting for the like why this is not working. I think that's one thing. The second principle I use is interpersonal versus intrapersonal observations. So like when you look at research, that's interpersonal observations. You're making a large scale assumption based off of a data set. That's what research is. But then you try to implement that research on an intrapersonal level, like within one athlete, and it's not effective. So like that's a conundrum that we have to work through. People are taking conclusions from like research papers and just blanketly applying them when there's like it's not really fit for their context or the person they're dealing with. Like a perfect example is, you got a lot of studies where maybe the population is not synonymous with yours. Maybe the population was, they've only been training for 8 weeks. Okay, well, if they've only been training for 8 weeks, anything's going to work. So, like, you can't go and just take that and do it on someone else. Or, maybe the modes of implementation for the different exercises in the research protocol weren't beneficial. Or, like, maybe someone is studying post-activation potentiation and the rest interval in the control trial or like the testing trial wasn't long enough. Like they hit a set of back squat and then, participants waited 12 minutes before they did the next jump or their power exercise, and then we noted an increase in performance. Well, that's not practical because no one's going to rest athletes in a college weight room for 8 to 12 minutes. Like that,
You
that's
think
why
you ain't got enough time.
exactly. That's why I don't believe in post-activation potentiation because it's not practical at all. So things like that, I think people aren't prepared for. Like you have to look at how studies were constructed and like how things were like how these conclusions were reached for you to consider it valid enough to apply to what you want to do. And I think people don't do that well enough.
I like it. What is something you would want us to ask our next guest?
Something I would want you to ask your next guest. Are they a
Yeah.
strength coach?
Yes.
I would ask them if they're training themselves and why they're training the way they are and like what answers they're trying to find. Like I find it crazy how many strength coaches aren't training themselves and aren't using their training as like an experiment. Like I feel like I'm constantly putting myself through things that I want to see work like for my athletes, and I'm not going to implement anything that I feel wouldn't work for them. So like I'm always running myself through kind of a test trial before I implement new stuff because I want to maximize my time. I want to make sure that what we're doing has merit, and I think like that's one way to filter through information is by putting yourself through it. Like XYZ book or study said that this is the proper set and rep scheme for this protocol, or like this is the rest interval, or this is the results you're going to get from whatever protocol you're using, and it's not that way when you implement it. So, why was that? Was it because you implemented it the wrong way? Was it because you interpreted the information the wrong way? Was it because of your training history versus the people in the studies or the people that this person was writing about? It helps you really like weed out a lot of errors in what you're trying to implement when you put yourself through it. So I think coaches should be called to a higher standard about like actually experimenting on themselves. I know a lot of coaches say, I saw one Twitter thread one day where a coach was like, I would rather be coached by a smart guy than a strong guy. And I'm like, I get what you're saying, but like, isn't there proof in like who they are, or like isn't there merit behind like what they've done to themselves or where they're at? Like, I think I get a lot of commitment and buy-in from athletes because I'm a very athletic guy. I train very hard. Like they come into the weight room to grab a snack like in the middle of class, like between classes one day. Like they'll see me training. Like that earns you respect as a coach. Like you're putting yourself through everything you're asking them to do and worse. Like I'm doing much more than I'm asking them to do. And when they see that, it's like Joe's doing that much. Like I think we can handle this. So I think that's really important, is holding coaches to a standard of experimentation.
I love it. You think it will ever slow down though as you get older?
Yeah, I think it will once my body can't handle it anymore. But I mean, that's But that's challenging me. Like, okay, can I control my fatigue? Can I control the schedule I'm trying to put myself on? Like, how do I make this work for longevity? Because performance is longevity, you know? Like, Will Rattel did a post about that a couple like 2 weeks ago or something like that. He was like, longevity is performance. Like all the things that help people perform better are also good for longevity. I hope I'm sprinting into my 40s. Like I would really hope to be in a position where I can do that. Maybe not running as fast as I am now, but trying to maintain that as long as I can. I think that would say something about how I've organized my training layout and how I've controlled fatigue and how I've respected my body's response to things. And like, I think that would say a lot about my skills, like controlling the responses of training in my athletes. I think that has a lot of value.
Yeah, if you hit 21.89 at 40, man, that's impressive right there.
I've ran 21.6 miles an hour. I'm trying to get to 22 right now. That's my goal for 2025.
I love it. I love it, Coach. We're gonna hold you to that standard and hold you accountable to that
Yeah,
22 miles per hour. But Coach,
please
I know
do.
you got a lot of programming to go for the rest of the day. I want to say thank you for your time and jumping on and just keeping it real and sharing your whole story about where you're going and what's been going on with Coach Fidula.
Of course, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You ask good questions, and I hope to watch more of your shows in the future for sure. I'll
I
probably go
appreciate
back
it.
and listen to Anthony's and
Yeah,
Tim's for sure.
Anthony's was just released like 2 weeks ago. Tim, we're gonna release soon. Yeah, there's some other good guys that have been on there. Some people from all across the world that are in different fields.
Nice. All right, man. Thank you so much.
All right, brother.